Democratic California Congressman Khanna has often gone his own way, defying seemingly typical political norms. He also oversees Silicon Valley.
That means he represents and knows many of the tech titans. In 2018, he was tapped by then House Leader Nancy Pelosi to help create an Internet Bill of Rights. It called for Americans to have full knowledge and control over their personal online data. So we are very curious to know what his thoughts are about DOGE, Elon Musk, and their access to our personal information.
Representative Khanna joined Rising in early December, a month after President Trump won re-election, and at the time he signaled he was open to working with the president and his advisor, Elon Musk. Fast forward to today, does he still feel that way? Joining us now is Representative Khanna himself, the ranking member of the House Subcommittee on Cyber Information Technologies and Innovation. Welcome back to Rising.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we always appreciate your time so much. What do you make of recent developments on the DOGE front? I know there are a lot of concerns from some Democrats about Elon now being overly involved in the process of running the government, although I believe when we spoke with you last, you agreed that there are areas to cut and to make the federal government more efficient and spend less money or waste less of our hard-won earned tax dollars. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's appalling that you have unelected people trying to stop payments that Congress has authorized. I mean, that has nothing to do with making government more effective or cutting waste and abuse. The reality is Congress appropriates money in this country, and the civil service in the Treasury Department is supposed to disperse it. You can't have coders or engineers push a button and stop that. And also, there are concerns about who has access to very sensitive data. Does everyone who had that data, were they all federal employees at the time they had the data? Or did some people get access to it before they went through the vetting process?
And Ro, we're seeing Democrats lining up now, responding to specifically those issues that you just described. Robbie and I have been having a discussion here about the future of the Democratic Party and where those leaders are in the scheme of things. Do you feel like the response that we saw from Hakeem Jeffries and others yesterday and previously, does that feel like the right direction for the party?
I do think that the Democrats have stiffened our spine because of the dramatic overreach by Donald Trump in trying to freeze payments to people and in basically trying to slash the departments like the Department of Education that helps ordinary Americans. I was talking to someone, Tracy, in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. She said, you know, I thought Donald Trump was going to help stop the taxes on my overtime. I thought he was going to help stop taxes on tips. I didn't realize that he was going to try to freeze Medicaid funding, which my mother needs in the hospital. And so this has really spooked people. I get that there's been a pause because of a federal judge, but people are really spooked that Trump could pause or cut some of this funding. And worse than that, that there's this bureaucracy of coders who can just stop the payments by manipulating the code.
So to play devil's advocate to that, look, I, like you, think that Congress should have more of a role in obviously doing legislating. That is what our founders intended, for Congress to be the branch that makes policy, and then the executive actually had a more narrow function to carry out the policies chosen by the legislature. You know as well as I do that, unfortunately, over the last several decades, Congress has ended up basically delegating so much of its own authority to the executive branch, to whether that's to the executive himself or to a lot of executive agencies that I would argue are sometimes unaccountable to the actual voters and to the more democratic aspects of our government vis-a-vis our elected representatives. Now, I agree with you. Trump ran on what he was going to do, is now implementing all of these things to change the way the federal government works. Is it now, if Congress speaks up and say, wait, we're supposed to be the ones making policy, when they haven't done that for years and years and years, does that then ring a little hollow?
Well, we have appropriated money, and that money is being stopped, or their efforts at stopping it. Now, look, if DOGE had said, look, we want to do a review, a review of all the funding that's going to these agencies. Some of that funding may be wasteful, and we're going to come back and make recommendations to Congress about safeguards and guardrails they need to have, or making sure that certain programs are cut because they're wasteful. That would be one thing. But you can't just say, okay, we're going to stop the payments that Congress has authorized and appropriated. It's a blatant violation, and I'm confident that the courts are going to find it a blatant violation. But what you've done is created great fear in the country that you have people who are not listening to the constitutional values of this country.
Congressman, you know some of these tech titans, and you probably know how Silicon Valley operates better than anybody else on Capitol Hill. Are any of the recent actions that we've seen over the past few days, are these surprising to you? Are you surprised by what Elon Musk has done?
I am. I think it's gone too far. But look, I mean, in Silicon Valley, there's this attitude that just break things, and that's part of the entrepreneurial process. But you can't break the United States government. I mean, there are people who rely on this for the monthly expenditures, for education, for healthcare. It's different than just being a startup. Are there practices of Silicon Valley that we should have, measurable results, fast cycles of iteration in products? Sure. But there are also obligations when you're in government that your job is to protect people who are relying on a lot of these services. And I think the rush in and break things attitude can cause a lot of harm, as we've seen.
I agree with that. I think some Americans would argue, conservative Americans would say, well, aren't these things already broken when we spend so much money? We spend tons of money on healthcare. We spend tons of money on education, but we don't get better results. The more money you put into the education system, but math and test scores remain the same. We spend dramatically more than other countries on our health system, and a lot of Americans feel like they don't get good outcomes despite that. So like something has gone wrong in the gears of the machine, and so we're bringing in, this is the Trump theory, bringing in an outside brilliant billionaire who's run some of the most successful companies in all of human experience to figure out what has gone wrong. I mean, Elon Musk took Twitter, fired like 80% of the workforce, and the site runs just as fine as it ever did. I don't want to break the federal government either, but is it already broken when we spend so much money on it and Americans don't feel like they get out of it what other countries that don't spend as much money get out of their systems?
Well, it absolutely is broken. The healthcare system is broken because we've got private insurance companies that are profiting while denying Americans healthcare. We've got pharmaceuticals and PBMs that are making millions of dollars for executives while ordinary people aren't getting the care they need. And by the way, it's causing wages to stagnate because small businesses and corporations have to pay so much money as a deadweight loss to these insurance companies for hospital fees, for the pharmaceutical industry. And we know what actually is efficient. You don't have to be a billionaire or an entrepreneur to know that. It's Medicare. It's got 2% administrative costs. And so many of us have been saying this healthcare system is broken, have Medicare for all. Donald Trump actually said it in one of his books in 2000 that the best system was the Canadian single payer system. And if we want to do that, let's do that. But to stop payments right now when we don't have that system is going to deny people health care.
Congressman, you were also Deputy Assistant Secretary at Commerce before you were elected to Capitol Hill in your current seat. We can't let you go without getting your take on the tariffs and the potential trade war that's going on right now. What do you make of all of this and the impacts for American people?
Well, there's a role for strategic tariffs. Paul Krugman, the Nobel laureate, actually won the Nobel Prize partly by showing that if you have an infant industry, if you have a national champion industry, semiconductors, advanced batteries, you want to probably have some strategic tariff to prevent Chinese dumping so that America can build those industries. But what makes no sense is to be putting tariffs on our allies on products that are non-durable, like food. I mean, why would we want to put a 25% tax on tomatoes, on avocados, on imported beer, Corona beer, on the cattle that come from Mexico that raises our price of hamburgers? And Trump realized this was nonsense because the markets were going to go down the next day because Americans were really concerned about their food prices going up. And so he basically caved, and Sheinbaum said that we've already been doing this under Biden, and Trump said, okay, and now there's a pause for 30 days. But this uncertainty gives retailers an excuse to raise prices, saying we're anticipating Trump's mismanagement. It is, it's a betrayal of the central promise, which was to lower grocery prices. I mean, you can't there's no argument for taxing food products and lowering grocery prices.
Representative Ro Khanna, thank you so much for coming on Rising yet again. We always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, did Elon Musk obtain all Social Security numbers? We'll get into that coming up.